Well, again, I mean, when we look at the idea of billions of dollars being spent and this whole philosophy that we need to be accountable for how we spend the money, I mean, again, when you have a situation like this and you look at the majority of the money that seems to be rebuilding the city now being private money, you wonder what is going on. Because we have all this money that everybody gave, right? All these fundraisers for Katrina and the billions the government talks about they spent. But a lot of the money they spent was to rebuild the levees. It didn't go into the homes. A lot of the money they gave was for people to subsist on. It wasn't pertaining to rebuilding places. You have one insurance company that has 200,000 claims that are still outstanding. Yeah. And that's just one insurance company. And you still have 2 pending lawsuits in that particular district pertaining to if it was water damage or if it was wind damage, and if these insurance companies are going to pay. Most people don't believe that's going to happen. They don't believe that they're going to rule in favor of those people that are suing. Yeah. And if they do that, a lot of these claims you're talking about are going to go by the wayside. And so what ends up happening is me and you pay for whatever is going to happen down there, because companies, quote unquote, was saying, well, these companies are not going to survive. They have to pay all these claims. Yeah, and I don't know if the government thought it was, a flippant comment or it's comedic relief. But when people were talking about the fact that FEMA couldn't do what Walmart and Target and other major companies did in terms of getting supplies and water and stuff down there, it is really ridiculous, the mere fact that a corporation, and maybe they need to hire the traffic managers in these companies, and have them, tell them how to redistribute supplies and goods. But they really need to look at the fact that it's something that's of the utmost importance, that if you can't figure out a way to fix this, especially given the debacle of how you handled it in the inception, then you really need to look at something else. It's funny that we were talking about earlier about AT&T with them saying that they couldn't outsource, or they needed to outsource because they couldn't find American workers. There were some people making some comments about the fact that we need to outsource the government because apparently they don't know what they're doing. But again, it seems to be a political philosophy that is affecting the rebuilding of New Orleans. You have this particular HUD project which they pushed on to get these people removed and rebuild these particular projects or communities, which some of them didn't need to be rebuilt. You look at the particular historical district, and the amount of money that's going into rebuilding those particular areas is very interesting. When you look at the decision by the city council to go along with putting these 5,000 families out of their homes, and you look at the problem with the shortage of housing, you look at the funding that was cut for people that were displaced from New Orleans, that lived in other cities, and that were traveling back to the city every day to work. The monies that they had for to subsidize their transportation has dried up. So when you look at these different things, where people are traveling hundreds of miles to come back to work, you wonder if they really want these people to come back. Yeah, and that's what strikes me as crazy, because, and this is a problem that we have whenever we address issues of concern to people of African descent. No one answers the question. When you say we're tearing down the projects and there's, I don't know how many hundreds of families in this building, if someone just says, okay, and where are they going? I just want someone to answer that question, not just leave it up in the air, not leave them hanging, not wait till it happens. Somebody needs to answer those questions, just like when we were talking earlier about, the prison industrial complex. You don't need to be an economist to figure out that there's going to be a problem after this initial situation. Answer the question of what the solution is before it becomes a major problem. And don't think they don't know the answer, because they've studied these things out and they already know the outcome. Because this is the thing that we always talk about that we lack within our community: long-term thinking. These people are putting these projects and philosophies into effect after studying what they think was going to happen. They already had a plan on rebuilding New Orleans on the books already. People are thinking this is something new. It's not. This is the people's big wish list. They came, oh, it's wonderful. This thing has happened now. Now we get to put into play the way and reshape this whole city the way we think it should have been from the beginning. Yeah, but you know what? I'm of the mindset where I want to hear you say it. Or I want to hear you stumble over your response when you can't answer the question. Even if you're not going to do whatever you're supposed to do, I want that embarrassment factor to kick in, or if somebody, at least to get them to think about it, because I think that's an issue with all of these things we've talked about in the past, of the lack of conscience.
on situations that people are suffering at the hands of mercenary greed and things of that nature. I want you to actually stop and think about the answer to a question that people are suffering when you're not even, you know, taking into consideration what they're going through.
And taking into consideration that the UN has condemned the United States, which you didn't even hear on the news, not a word about it on any major news, for the way they've treated the people of New Orleans, and especially the people of color. And you haven't heard a word about it. And there's nothing new going on to remedy the situation.
Well, unfortunately, you know, the UN isn't carrying as much weight as it should, you know, because, you know, when we say don't go to war, we still go to war. When we say this is a major issue, you know, the killings in Africa, you know, these things are ignored. So, you know, it's unfortunate, but it's not getting the credibility that it's supposed to have or has had in the past.
Okay, well, we're going to wrap this particular segment up. Stay tuned for more Black Men Screaming in just a moment.